The best swap advice. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode of Honda Street Garage. Today I wanted to talk about basic swap advice. A lot of times, we kind of get in a rush to put these motors in these cars and we got to get them out the door. And there's some things that you guys don't see that take us extra time. I wanted to kind of go over some of that stuff with you, as well as wiring and things like that. One of the things that's really overlooked is mounts. When you use aftermarket mounts, they tend to kind of be a little shifty. If you notice here in this car, I have an EK here. I don't know if you can see that, but right here you can see like a little slot here for adjustment, and the same thing for this side. Sometimes with aftermarket mounts, I've noticed that it can be tricky to kind of get the third mount or bracket hooked up, whether it's the rear or the transmission side or the driver's side, just because they can be tweaked a little bit, unlike the factory mounts. The factory mounts have a little more play in them because they're a much softer rubber, things like that. Take your time, plan to if you've never done a swap before, plan to take 2 or 3 days to really give yourself enough time to really get everything done properly. You don't want to rush things and make a mistake and really screw something up that will cost you in the long run. A lot of times we don't really go over mistakes that may happen. Plan for that. Plan for mistakes. That's the biggest thing that I can kind of stress when doing a swap. Sometimes, you strip a bolt or cross thread something, and that's just the name of the game. Sometimes you don't want to do that, and a lot of times that's just because people are in a rush and they just want to put things together. So really take your time is one of the biggest things that I would stress. Now, as far as wiring goes, I get the same question over and over and over again. Which harness do I use? And the answer to that question is always use the harness that came with the car. You're always going to use the harness that came with the car unless you want to purchase an aftermarket harness like Rywire or something like that, which is definitely a great upgrade. Harnesses can be quite brittle over the years and get dried out and kind of rotted and delicate. The Rywire harness will take a lot of headache out of things, even though they are a bit pricey. A lot of people want to spend all their money on the engine and transmission and upgrades and things like that, and really ignore the wiring harness. For the most part, the things that you'll run into is that the distributor plug might be different, or the injectors might be different, or the air temperature sensor plug might be different. You can just modify those things. If your injectors are different, you can swap out OBD1 injectors for OBD2 injectors and they'll work just fine. When it comes to the distributor plug, try to get the right distributor for your car. For example, say you're putting an LS motor from a 94 Integra into a 96 Civic. The distributor plug is going to be a little bit different, so one of the things to get is a 96 distributor so it plugs right up. But of course, Rywire offers jumper harnesses for things just like that, and the same goes for injectors and other plugs on the car. As far as running the ECU and which ECU to run, a lot of times I'll suggest to convert to OBD1 because it's just overall much easier to do. You can go to places like Xenocron.com or eBay and purchase a socketed ECU, and they'll even program the chip for you if you tell them what engine you have and what mods, and they could disable sensors like the NOx sensor or the O2 sensor, and it can be just a plug and play affair. In those sort of cases, of course, you'll need a jumper harness from OBD2 to OBD1 or OBD0 to OBD1, and whenever you're ordering an OBD2 harness, make sure that you're sure of if it's OBD2A or OBD2B. OBD2A is 96 to 98, OBD2B is 99 to 2000. Now, one of the big things that's kind of overlooked is budget. A lot of people might say that I have $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 for a swap, and they'll spend all that money on the engine swap and not really account for anything going wrong. Sometimes when you take cars apart, things like ball joints or tie rod ends kind of get destroyed sometimes, or axles, and you really need to kind of have a little bit of money left over just in case you run into any problems. And the biggest thing that I really can't stress enough is do your research. Don't just take somebody's word for it. Don't just read one forum. Search the internet, use Google. It is your friend. Find people that have experience in the matter. Don't just take someone's word for it because one guy told you something or I told you something. Really do your research, because sometimes you can even hear something and 6 months down the road you remember it differently than the way that it's actually supposed to be. So really do your research, take your time, and plan things out. That's one of the biggest things that I see more than anything, is that people don't do enough research. They kind of just jump the gun, you know, putting an engine in their car, and they have completely the wrong harness or the wrong shift linkage or the wrong axles. It really just comes down to, you know, taking your time and doing your research and making sure that you're 100% right when it comes to these things. Now, another thing to really think about is have someone else around. When it comes to starting up a new engine swap, now another thing that I like to really have is I like to have someone else around to double check my work. You know, ask me questions. Did you put oil in the engine? Did you put fluid in the transmission? Have you filled it up with coolant? Have you tightened these bolts? Have you tightened these bolts? You know, it's very important to have somebody around that'll kind of double check your work if you can. Not everybody's in that position to have someone else around to be kind of tech savvy, but I would definitely suggest if you can have someone else around to just double check and, you know, make sure that you're covering all the bases, because sometimes you can get in a rush and not put things back together the way you should because you thought about something while you were doing something else, and you know, make a mistake, and you definitely don't want that to happen. Now, when it comes to starting up your motor for the first time, I always suggest priming the engine. And what priming the engine is unplugging the ECU and turning the engine over as if you're trying to start it, and keep turning it until the oil light goes off, and that ensures that oil has been turned through the motor before the first startup, because those engines usually have been sitting for a while, so it's just a good precaution to take. You know, and once again, having someone else around to make sure that you put oil in something is very important. And when you do first start up that engine, double check for leaks underneath the car, all over the engine. Just double check things. And a big thing that's usually not in our videos is that once you do have the swap in your car and running, double check everything for the first day or two, because there could be little hoses that might be leaking, or that you really just need to keep an eye on. That it could be you forgot to tighten a screw, or, you know, put a hose clamp on the way it should be, and it might just be barely leaking. So whenever you do a swap, you know, always double check after the first couple days, just to ensure that everything is doing what it should. It's not leaking anything. It's not leaking coolant or oil. So in closing, basically take your time, have fun with it, do your research, you know, double check everything, have the right parts that you need before you start, have a friend double check your work, make sure you use the right fluids, try to do everything right the first time if you can, make sure you prime the engine before you start it, you know, double check your work a day or two after you get the swap running, making sure that everything is running tip top. Also bleed your coolant, because having air in your coolant system is can cause all kinds of issues, honestly. We have a video on how to bleed your coolant, so go through the old videos and check that out. And if you do have any questions or videos, please go through our old videos and see if we've already done it before. Now, just to give you guys some sort of something, whatever, blah, 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 I'm going to talk about this swap in particular. I wasn't really planning on, you know, doing this swap because it was going to be here for like a day, and it's not that big of a deal. And you guys have seen videos of this type of swap before, which is a B series and a EK. So this is a 99 Civic Si. It's got an LS VTEC in it. The previous owner rebuilt the block and did a head package with cams and things like that. So we really haven't heard this engine run, so we don't know if it's good or not. But I'll go over what's in this car so that you guys can kind of use it as a template if you want. So we have an LS VTEC here, has a B16 transmission. Any LS, GSR, or B16 transmission will work. Any B series transmission will work. He's using innovative mounts for the EK chassis or EJ chassis, whichever one you want to look at it. It uses a 99 2000 Honda Civic Si rear T-bracket. It has one of these intake manifolds. I cannot remember the name of it. It's an aftermarket intake manifold. If you notice here, it does have a G-Series VTEC solenoid. I'm not super crazy about that, but they do work. Basically, this car was kind of in pieces, and we've been putting it back together, you know, trying to find a bunch of little bolts and things like that. So it's been kind of time consuming, so it's not really ideal for filming a swap, but it's going to use either a 99 to 2000 Honda Civic Si shift linkage. I have it over here. I've actually got two of them. So it's going to use the B series shift linkage. The thing that makes the B series definitely stand out from the D series is that this ring right here is a lot bigger. This is one without the bushing. That will be used on this car, and this is also the same shift linkage that's from a 94 to 2001 Acura Integra. It's also using 94 to 2001 Acura Integra axles or 99 to 2000 Honda Civic Si axles, which this car is using. This has a standard basic header on it, nothing too special. It does have a set of cam gears. It also has a PCV system, which is kind of exciting, which I wish I could have shown you. But here's the breather for it, and these two hoses coming off the breather box here, they actually go to the back of the block, ventilating the crankcase or ventilating the block, because normal B18B blocks do not have a PCV system on the back of the block like Type R, GSR, and B16s do. The reason why they need that is because there's a lot of pressure that builds up. If you're running a B18B or a B20 block, it's not 100% necessary, but it will definitely help out. And of course, if you boost or go high compression, you definitely need them. Having a breather box is super important. And it will be converted to OBD1 to make things relatively simple. It has been wire tucked, not a big deal. It can run the stock SI radiator without a problem. There's other footage that you'll see them kind of bolting it in. I'll show you that now. I'm talking. I'll kind of splice the footage in there. But anyway, so that's this swap in this car. So good luck, and once again, thank you guys for the support. We passed 44,000 subscribers. We're about 7,000 likes on Facebook. Keep up with us on Instagram and Snapchat. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the next video. I'm going to try to keep pumping them out this week. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. I don't know if I'll be able to put a video out, but if I do, you'll definitely see that. Thanks guys again. See you in the next episode.